There's a powder sitting on a shelf right now, in a hardware store, probably near you. It costs less than a cup of coffee, and if you knew what it could do, you'd never pay for pest control again. It can wipe out an entire termite colony. Not slow them down, not repel them. Wipe them out permanently. And here's the part that should bother you. You were never supposed to know about it. Every year, millions of homeowners across the world wake up to a nightmare. Not a dramatic one. Not loud, not obvious, silent. Tiny creatures, no bigger than a grain of rice, are eating their homes. From the inside out. By the time most people notice, the damage is already done. Structural beams hollowed, floorboards compromised, foundations weakened, and then the phone call. You need a professional. This is going to cost you. And it does. Thousands of dollars. Sometimes tens of thousands. Treatment after treatment. Year after year. Because that's how the system works. But what if it didn't have to? What if the solution, the real solution, has existed for over a century? What if it was sitting on a pharmacy shelf, labeled for something completely different, priced at a few dollars? While an entire industry built itself on the idea that you needed them to handle this. That's not a theory, that's not a guess. That's a story that starts in the early 1700s, runs through decades of buried research, and leads directly to your front door. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why you never heard it. To understand what was hidden, you first have to understand what was found. Italy, 1702. Imagine a candlelit room somewhere in Tuscany, stone walls, the smell of sulfur, glass vessels bubbling over an open flame. A mineralogist, a man named Wilhelm Homburg, is working late into the night. He's not looking for a weapon. He's not looking for a miracle. He's simply doing what scientists of his era did, mixing, observing, recording. He takes a mineral compound found naturally in volcanic hot springs. He applies heat. He isolates the crystals. And what he pulls from that reaction is boric acid. He calls it sal sedativum, the sedative salt. He thinks it might be useful in medicine. He has no idea what he's actually created. For the next 2 centuries, boric acid lives a quiet life. It shows up in antiseptics, eye washes, wound treatments. People use it to preserve food, to clean wounds, to treat fungal infections. It's unremarkable, familiar, cheap. Nobody looks at it and thinks, weapon. But then, something happens. 1920s, the American Southwest. The termite problem in the United States is getting worse. Subterranean termites, the most destructive species on the planet, are spreading. Warmer climates, more wood frame construction, more food, more colonies. Researchers start looking for answers, and somewhere in a government agricultural lab, a scientist decides to test something unexpected. He takes boric acid, that same cheap mineral salt that's been sitting in medicine cabinets for 200 years, and he applies it to wood. Then he introduces termites, and he watches. What happens next changes everything. The termites begin feeding on the treated wood. Within days, they start dying. Not just the ones who fed, but their colony mates. The ones who never even touched the wood. That's when the researcher leans forward in his chair, because something about this isn't normal. Something about this is different. And that's where the story takes a turn. To understand why boric acid is so effective against termites, you need to understand something about how termites live. And once you do, you'll understand why the pest control industry would prefer you didn't. Termites are social insects. They live in colonies, sometimes millions strong, built on a system of cooperation so precise it almost looks intelligent. Workers feed soldiers. Soldiers protect the queen. The queen produces more workers. Everyone feeds. Everyone shares. And that's exactly what makes them vulnerable. When a termite ingests boric acid, the compound enters its digestive system. Now, boric acid doesn't work like a traditional poison. It doesn't simply overwhelm the nervous system and kill quickly. It's more methodical than that. more brutal in its patience. Boric acid interferes with the termites' ability to metabolize nutrients. It disrupts the enzymes in their gut, the same enzymes that allow them to break down the cellulose in wood and extract energy from it. Without those enzymes functioning properly, the termite is essentially eating, but starving. It's consuming wood, getting nothing from it. And simultaneously, boric acid begins to penetrate the termite's exoskeleton. Imagine the outer shell of this creature, that waxy, structured layer that keeps moisture in and threats out, beginning to break down. The termite starts to dehydrate, from the inside and the outside simultaneously. It's a process that takes days, which means the termite doesn't die immediately. It keeps working, it keeps feeding, it keeps touching things. And here's where the chain reaction begins. Termites engage in a behavior called trophallaxis. That's a scientific term for something deeply, almost disturbingly simple. They feed each other mouth to mouth. Workers regurgitate food for soldiers, for the queen, for larvae. Which means the boric acid doesn't stop with the termite that ingested it first. It moves through the food-sharing network of the entire colony. Slowly, quietly, methodically, one termite touches another, shares food, passes it on, and the compound spreads, like a slow, invisible signal traveling through a network, until it reaches the center. No emergency alarm goes off in the colony, no evacuation, no awareness, because the colony doesn't know it's under attack. It simply starts collapsing. Workers stop appearing, soldiers weaken, the queen's output slows, and eventually, the entire structure fails. Now here's the part that genuinely sets boric acid apart from almost every other pest control solution. Termites cannot develop resistance to it. Most pesticides work by targeting specific biological pathways that insects can, over generations, evolve to work around. Boric acid doesn't work that way. It attacks fundamental biological processes, metabolism, hydration, cellular function. These aren't optional systems. You can't evolve past them. There is no resistant strain. There is no boric acid-proof termite. It doesn't exist. And it cannot exist. Which means this compound isn't just effective today. It's effective permanently. This isn't speculation. This isn't a theory someone put together in a basement. The research is real. Documented. Decades old. 1934. The U.S. Department of Agriculture publishes findings on boron-based compounds and wood preservation. The data is compelling. Wood treated with boric acid shows dramatically reduced termite activity, and not just for months, for years. By the 1950s and 60s, researchers in New Zealand and Australia, countries where termite damage is arguably worse than in the United States, begin studying borate treatment systematically. What they find becomes foundational. Timber treated with disodium octaborate tetrahydrate, a borate compound closely related to boric acid, resists termite penetration for decades. Not seasons. Decades. New Zealand eventually builds an entire timber treatment industry around boron-based preservation. Today, boron-treated timber is standard in residential construction in several countries. Standard. Not experimental. Not fringe. Standard. Japan, too. A country with significant subterranean and dry wood termite pressure, particularly in older wooden structures, has studied and applied borate treatments extensively. Research from Japanese universities in the 1980s and 90s confirms what American and Australian scientists had already found. Boric acid, properly applied, creates a long-term barrier that termites cannot overcome. By the 1990s, the EPA in the United States registers borate-based products specifically for termite control. Products like Timbor and Boracare, professional borate treatments, enter the market. They work. Studies confirm it repeatedly. And here's a detail worth sitting with for a moment. Some researchers track borate-treated structures over 20-year periods. 20 years. No reinfestation, no colony reestablishment, no retreatment needed. One application. Permanent. So now ask yourself a simple question. A very, very simple question. If a solution this effective has been documented, studied, published, and confirmed for nearly a century, why don't you know about it? Why has nobody told you? Why, when you call a pest control company, do they never mention it? Why do the advertisements never say its name? That's where the story changes. Let's talk about money, because that's where every buried truth eventually leads. The global pest control market is worth approximately $22 billion every single year. In the United States alone, termite control accounts for somewhere between $2 billion and $3 billion of that annually. Now think about how that money flows. A homeowner discovers termites. They panic, reasonably, because termites cause over $5 billion in structural damage to American homes every single year. More than fires, more than storms, more than earthquakes, more than all of them combined. The homeowner calls a company. An inspector arrives. The inspector, trained by the industry, certified by the industry, employing methods approved by the industry, recommends a treatment. The average termite treatment in the United States costs between $500 and $3,000. For serious infestations, $5,000 to $10,000. And most contracts don't stop there. Annual inspections, annual renewal fees, preventative treatments, year after year. The average homeowner who enters a termite treatment contract pays somewhere between $1,500 and $3,000 over 5 years, sometimes far more. Now compare that to this: a pound of boric acid, enough to treat multiple rooms, multiple entry points, multiple pieces of structural wood, costs approximately $3 to $6. $3 to $6 against $3,000. Now ask yourself, who benefits if you never learn this? Sit with that for a moment. Not as anger, not as outrage, just as a question. Because here's the thing about systems. Nobody has to sit in a boardroom and say the words, "suppress the information." That's not how it works. That's not how it's ever worked. The suppression happens quietly, structurally, through the way knowledge flows or doesn't. Imagine you're starting a pest control company. To operate legally, you need a license. That license requires training. That training is designed by industry bodies. Those industry bodies are funded in large part by chemical manufacturers. The chemical manufacturers make liquid termiticides, bait systems, fumigation compounds, products that require professional application, products that require repeat purchases, products that generate recurring revenue. Now ask yourself, what is the financial incentive for any of these entities to push a one-time, cheap mineral-based powder as the primary solution? There isn't one. There is no financial incentive, and so the system doesn't push it. It doesn't necessarily ban it. It doesn't necessarily lie about it. It simply doesn't mention it. The training programs focus on liquid barriers, baiting systems, fumigation. The certifications focus on chemical application. The sales scripts focus on recurring service agreements. And boric acid? It gets mentioned, if at all, as a footnote, a historical curiosity, something that might work for small problems. Meanwhile, the framing of termite control as something requiring professional intervention becomes so deeply embedded that most homeowners never question it. Of course you need a professional. Of course it's complicated. Of course it requires special chemicals you couldn't possibly handle yourself. Of course, but here's what they don't tell you about that framing. Boric acid is listed and registered by the EPA as an approved pesticide. It's sold openly in hardware stores, pharmacies, and online. It requires no license to purchase, no certification to apply, no professional to administer. And it works. The complexity narrative serves one purpose. It keeps you dependent. Not because you need to be, but because your dependence is worth approximately $22 billion a year. Let's put the scale of this in perspective, because until you feel the size of it, it doesn't hit. Every year, termites damage approximately 600,000 homes in the United States. 600,000. That's not every decade. That's not a cumulative figure. That's every 12 months. Termites cause more structural damage to American homes annually than fires, more than storms, more than earthquakes. Let that land. The disaster that gets no news coverage. No emergency response, no federal aid. It just quietly eats. The average homeowner doesn't discover a termite infestation until it's already been active for 3 to 5 years. 3 to 5 years of silent, invisible destruction. By the time you see the damage, you're not catching a problem early. You're surveying a catastrophe. And then the bills start. $2,000 for treatment. $800 for annual inspection. Some $200 for follow-up treatment 18 months later. $3,500 for structural repairs. And the company that sold you the original plan? They'll be happy to help with the repairs too. For a fee, of course. Across the United States, homeowners and businesses collectively spend over $2 billion every year just on termite control services. Not repairs, not remediation. Control services. The recurring contracts. The inspections. The treatments. $2 billion. Flowing from panicked homeowners to an industry built around the idea that this problem is too complex for you to handle yourself. An idea that may not be entirely accurate. It was here the whole time. Boric acid. Molecular formula, H3BO3. First isolated in 1702. Found naturally in volcanic springs, seawater, and certain fruits and vegetables. Available right now at most hardware stores, pharmacies, and online retailers. Priced at roughly $3 to $8 per pound. That's it. That's the substance. Not a new discovery. Not a secret compound smuggled out of a laboratory. A mineral salt that has been sitting on shelves for 300 years. And yet, most homeowners have never considered it. Most pest control companies don't lead with it. Most advertisements have never named it. Because the story of pest control, at least the version you've been sold, was never really about solving your problem permanently. It was about managing it. Indefinitely. Profitably. But that's their story. Here's yours. Let's talk about what boric acid actually does in practice, and how people use it. The most common approach is as a wood treatment. When boric acid solution, typically boric acid dissolved in water or glycol, is applied directly to unfinished, untreated wood, it penetrates the cellular structure of the timber. It becomes part of the wood. Not a surface coating that wears off. Not a barrier that degrades with rain or humidity. Inside the wood itself. And when termites feed on that wood, you already know what happens. For existing structures, boric acid can be applied to wall voids, those hollow spaces behind your drywall where termites love to travel. Crawl spaces, dark, humid, the preferred highway of subterranean termites. Exposed wooden beams in attics and basements. Around window and door frames, common entry points for drywood termites. The most widely used professional-grade borate product, Boracare, is literally boric acid combined with a glycol carrier that drives penetration deeper into wood. It's registered by the EPA. It's used by some pest control professionals as a treatment option. It works, and the active ingredient is the same substance you can buy for $6 now. And this matters. Boric acid, like any chemical compound, should be used with basic precautions. Keep it away from food preparation areas. Avoid inhaling the powder form in large quantities. Keep it out of reach of children and pets, particularly in its concentrated form. It has low mammalian toxicity. It's far less toxic to humans and animals than most conventional pesticides, but less toxic is not the same as harmless. Respect it, use it correctly, and if you're uncertain, consult someone who knows. Also important, application method matters. Dry powder applied carelessly can scatter. The most effective applications use boric acid dissolved in water, then painted or sprayed onto wood surfaces, or injected into wall voids using a basic bulb duster. Simple tools. Basic technique. Nothing that requires a professional license. Just patience and care. I want to be honest with you here, because honesty is the thing this story has been missing. Boric acid is not magic. It is not the answer to every situation, and I won't pretend otherwise. For severe, established infestations, particularly subterranean termite colonies that have built extensive tunnel networks deep beneath your foundation, boric acid alone may not be sufficient. The compound works best as a preventive treatment or as an early-stage intervention. When you're treating exposed wood before construction, if you catch a termite problem early, small, contained, just beginning, you have options most people never hear about. Reinforcing weak spots in an older home? Same story. But when a colony has been active for years, when it stretches deep underground and numbers in the millions, surface treatments alone won't reach it. That's when professionals step in. Bait systems, soil barriers, targeted chemicals, tools that require real expertise. This isn't about saying the pest control industry is wrong. It's about realizing it's not your only path. Because here's the part most people miss. Sometimes, a simple $3 solution could be part of the answer, yet it's rarely even mentioned. Think about that. There's a powder, cheap, widely available, studied for decades, used across the world, proven, safe when handled properly. And under the right conditions, a single application can protect wood for years. It's not hidden, not restricted. It's been sitting on shelves the whole time. So why don't more people know? Not because of some grand conspiracy, but because simple, one-time solutions don't drive billion-dollar industries. Complexity does. Recurring treatments do. Long-term contracts do. And that creates a quiet gap between what exists and what you're told. You deserve to see all your options, not just the profitable ones. This video isn't about a powder. It's about awareness. And this, it's just the beginning.